You know, there's a certain kind of person who refuses to settle for the script handed to them. Someone who looks at the world, feels that quiet nudge in their soul, and decides to build a life on their own terms, no matter how unconventional or uncertain it may seem from the outside. Now, today's guest is a living example of what it means to create your own path with courage, creativity, and an unwavering commitment to authenticity. Over the years, I've watched him blaze trails, start movements, and help thousands of people reconnect to themselves, all while staying true to his own vision, no matter how wild the ride has gotten. I have to say, I admire and respect this man deeply, not only for what he's accomplished, but for the heart, integrity, and playfulness he brings to everything he does. Honestly, it's probably why we keep finding ourselves collaborating, dreaming big, and pushing the boundaries of what's possible together, whether it's in Breathe with Cannabis or one of our other projects. So if you're someone who's been feeling the call to step onto a new path, or if you're already walking your own road and looking for a spark of inspiration to keep going, this episode is going to be a perfect one for you to check out. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome my friend, my brother in breath, and a true architect of his own life, my man Christopher August, to the show. Christopher August, my man. Dude, anytime I get to be joined here with you is a good day in my book. And like I said in the intro to all you tuning in, Chris and I really wanted to do this show because the last time Chris was on Highly Optimized, God, that might have been, I don't even remember the last time you were on here. It had to have been a while, like 2 years ago or more.
Was it the shadow work session, or was that the?
I think that was this one time on psychedelics. That was what I was thinking of too. So it's obviously been a while since you've been on, and I don't think the last time you were on, we really went a lot into your own journey of a lot of the different things you've gone through. You know, from starting your business and finding your mission to near-death experiences to, you know, the wisdom you have for other people that are listening to this show that are also looking to either go out and pave their own path, or they're already doing that and they want some more tips, tricks, and secrets on how they can keep finding the way back to their heart. So, dude, it's super exciting to have you here. How you doing today, brother? How's Mexico?
Oh, it's fantastic as always. You gotta love Mexico. It's a beautiful place to be.
Yeah, dude.
And this is a beautiful place to be as well.
Oh, dude, I mean, you make a trade-off in Mexico. No chemtrails, but no Amazon Prime. You know, it's a pretty good trade-off, actually, you know?
Funny enough, we just got some Amazon Prime, so we're getting there.
Dude, hell yeah, bro. I still got your methylene blue at the house.
That's right. I need that.
Yeah, yep. So
I'll see you at the higher self retreat in September.
Yeah. I'll be sitting on it like a nest egg, you know, like a chicken sits on an egg. You know,
Keep
I think
it
chickens
warm
sit
for
on
me.
eggs, right? You know, yeah. Yeah. But man, I'm super excited to dive into all this magic with you, man. And, you know, I think a really good place to start for the listeners that I'm sure most people tuning in have heard at least something from you before. I mean, we do Breathe with Cannabis every month. A lot of people from the show come there and we've done a lot of stuff together. But why don't you give us a quick overview of how you got onto the path you are now? And then once we get there, we're going to go a lot more intricate in terms of the details of, you know, kind of like once you found this path, how did you keep going? What are the strategies you've learned? Things like that. But tell everyone a little bit about who you are and how you found your way into breath work, shadow work, coaching, somatic work, all the things you do now.
Yeah. It's, again, I think all of our origin stories and heroes' journeys, you know, we can go on and on and on. But in short, in brief, for anybody listening, essentially, back in 2012, I finished my master's degree, climbing the corporate ladder, working in corporate leadership, doing pretty well, making good money, you know, doing the things that I want to do from a material standpoint, partying, DJing, having a lot of fun. But there was just this void of emptiness within myself, and emptiness that really I couldn't really fully shake. And that really just led to asking questions of, you know, the deeper questions of life. Who am I? Why am I here? You know, how am I meant to serve? Because there was a deep desire within myself to make a difference and to help people. But I didn't really understand what that even looked like. You know, I had found myself chasing this, you know, societal status quo type of life where, you know, we go to school, we get a job and so forth, and thinking that's going to make you happy. Where, you know, in my case, and I think in most people's cases, I felt, you know, unfulfilled and really deeply dissatisfied. And so I started asking these questions and I started praying for answers. And one answer came when I was driving home from work one day on the 33 in Buffalo, New York. And I saw a sign that said, "Are you ready to answer the call?" And it was said sponsored by the Peace Corps. And at that time, I didn't know what the Peace Corps was until I went home and I looked it up. and found out that it was this grassroots organization that sent people to 80 different countries around the world, and you can give back in service in different capacities. And so, long story short, I applied over a year of different tests, mental, emotional, physical tests. And I finally got in and got accepted. And a year and a half later from that point, I was flying to Tanzania, Africa, where I served as a Peace Corps volunteer for 2 years of my life, living in a pretty primal way, cooking over a fire, no electricity, no running water, no internet, just really, really fully living aligned and connected to nature in so many ways, and to the community there as well, which obviously for anybody listening to this can imagine, just that alone was just a massive catalyst in my life and brought me deeper into these questions I was asking, and allowing myself to really go within my own inner caverns, my own inner world, to uncover the truth behind the whole mask and facade that I had been wearing for so long.
Dude, so powerful, man. It's funny, man. Like, I often forget you went to freaking Tanzania. Like, I have to forget that like epic fucking journey you went on. And I'm curious for you, man. Like, what was the biggest culture shock? I don't know if that's the right term, but you get where I'm going with that. Like, what was the thing that surprised you about Tanzania that maybe you didn't expect to be surprised by? Because I imagine when you thought about no electricity, you had a good idea what that would be like. I imagine you had a good idea what the living there would be like based on what you learned, but what maybe surprised you when you got there? And also, kind of in tandem to that question, if that surprise overwhelmed you at all, how did you move through that overwhelm, if there was overwhelm attached to that?
Yeah, I would say that I don't know if I'd call it a surprise, but the first thing that really sets in for me when you ask that is that, just thinking about how we perceive the world around us, right? Growing up in the West, growing up in a very privileged culture and having everything that we need to at least survive and thrive in many cases, that the people living in these communities, in these villages, seemingly don't have much material possession, but they, on a scale, if we were to sort of bring a scale of just 0 to 10 out and rate that on a happiness level, I would put the West in America and all of these countries that have perceivably everything they need at a pretty low level of happiness. Everyone's pretty much just like unfulfilled in so many ways. But these people, because they have tribe, because they have each other, there was a sense of like really, really deep level of connection and happiness, and something that I had never really perceived before overall. Sure, they had their struggles, but that in itself was massive to reframe, like, we really don't need much, but we need each other. And there's this sense of belonging that when people are supporting each other and we're working in harmony and collaboration as one, that we can truly do so many things. And so many of us have been really conditioned and programmed into doing the complete opposite. We live in these individualized silos and really are completely disconnected, not only from each other, but from ourselves. And so that was massive. It's like a deep connection when you're living amongst the land and amongst the elements. It connects you to the harmonious biorhythm of the earth, which is massive for your own mental, emotional, and spiritual health.
Wow. That's amazing, dude. And, it's funny because I made a post yesterday about how, we were talking about money in the last money mastery ceremony, and I was putting up a replay post. And I was saying, if you want to make more money, you got to put the heart before the mind. Yeah. And what I meant by that, we were talking about it the other day, I think at Breathe with Cannabis. But what I meant by that was the idea that your mind is a great servant, but a terrible master. And I think a lot of people just put the cart before the horse. They're not using the tool correctly, or at least in alignment, put it that way. I don't know if there's a correct and incorrect, but essentially if you're tuning into your heart each day and you're feeling where your heart wants to guide you and what makes you feel good, and then the mind is a tool to help you get there in terms of the logic of like, all right, I got to get on the plane, I got to buy a plane ticket, whatever it is, right? Then you're in a really good right relationship with not only yourself, but also the land around you, and you're harmonious with earth. But, as you were saying, what you were saying about how when you went to Tanzania, the thing that shocked you, or not shocked you, but at least like was a little bit of a surprise, was the fact that people with so, quote unquote little in the eyes of a Western person can be so ecstatic, and the person of the West with all the material things can be so miserable. And to me, that's the same thing as putting the mind before the heart, or the heart before the mind, because what you're talking about there is community, tribe, being connected to nature, what we would call circadian rhythm health over here in the West. These things that actually today are pretty complex in the West, but they're actually supposed to be very simple. And like my favorite idea I've ever gotten from God says, simplicity is the language of God, complexity is the language of the ego. Think about it, right? If human beings needed three, fancy sport cars, three houses, and all these things to be happy, that would be extremely challenging for the average person to attain. So that can't be the answer. And when you go to these kind of communities, even when I've gone to Mexico or El Salvador, yeah, they don't have Amazon shipping or whatever it is. And they're so happy. They're having a blast. They're joking with people. And it reminds me of that, I think it's a proverb is what they'd call it, of the Mexican fisherman who, goes out every day and fishes for a couple hours and catches the fish he needs and goes home to his family to hang out with his kids and whatnot. And this businessman from the West comes there and is like, oh man, you should totally take an investment from the bank and buy 3 more ships. And he's like, why? And he's like, well, eventually you won't even have to fish and you can spend more time with your family. And he's like, but I do that now. And so it's the perfect explanation and practical example of what you're saying there. And that has been something that shocked me too about traveling, which is one of the many reasons I'm such a big fan of traveling and getting out of the box and not just going to like the other very civilized places, but going a little bit rugged. It's really fun.
Yep. I agree. Yeah, no, it just puts things into perspective, which I think everybody needs a perspective shift to see that their little box that they've created and lived in is actually in many ways limiting. And, I know lots of people that maybe have all the material possessions and money, but they are just not really fully living their purpose, or they don't have direction, and they're just in miserable relationships and so forth. And so it just really taught me a lot about life, being there. And then of course, following that, it was like, all right, so I can't come home and be the same person. I can't come home from that experience and actually go back to doing what I was doing. So what am I going to do? What is my service, right? What is my way in which I can begin to use my innate gifts and give back? And that just developed over time as I explored different modalities of healing, of transformation. And I knew, that I was meant to serve within this realm of supporting people within their own personal and spiritual growth. And obviously that's taken shape over a decade, and diving deep into these different modalities that I work with and how that has now supported me in creating a life and a business, and being able to then give back in the world through the lens of my own gifts and my own joy and excitement.
Dude, so powerful, man. And, if people don't know, tell people where you're living right now and what your life looks like. Anything you're willing to share, of course, but like, I want to share with people like how different your life looks than most people. Yet at the same time, it's very similar in other ways, right? Like you're still getting to do what you love, but like you're not living in the States. Like just tell people a little bit for a couple of minutes of what your life looks like right now. Maybe like, and I'll leave with this. Chris was born in Buffalo, right? Buffalo, New York. And,
Yep.
Is an American, just like a lot of us listen to the show. But tell people where you're living right now and what your life looks like. Because I think for a lot of people, they may be able to witness you saying these things and be like, wow, that's what's possible for me if I choose to dream bigger as well.
Yeah. So basically, since I got back from Tanzania, that was in 2015, I've lived in 5 different places. I've backpacked through South America for close to a year. I've lived all over different parts of the U.S. And then 4 years ago, I moved down to Mexico, pretty much on a whim. I came to visit down here. I was doing a men's retreat. And then I ended up basically that same week signing a lease on a house where, I've been here since then. with my son's mom and with my son, and just coming down here and living within this community here in San Miguel de Allende, and living amongst the land as well. I live in the countryside, and the beautiful thing about this is that I get to not only live in a place that I feel extremely connected to. The people are incredible, the culture, the warmth, the authenticity, but then be able to have best of both worlds and run a business from here, but then travel back and forth to the US to do events, to do stuff with you and other people. And so it's been a really beautiful dichotomy where I can create and kind of be nestled in my little hermit place out in nature in the countryside of Mexico, but then be able to still then travel and do all the things that really I've always dreamt of. Like, travel is such a huge part of my life. And then also to be able to just experience the world from a different lens and not live, like I said, so boxed in. So yeah, it's been a beautiful, beautiful journey so far.
Dude, guys, and this is what's possible when you listen to your heart. It really can be that simple. And simple doesn't mean easy, of course, right? You've gone through your trials and tribulations, so we can get into some of them a little bit. But, again, at the end of the day, what's the best that could happen, guys? Like, we're not here to just pay taxes and die, especially not pay taxes, because they are optional if you don't know. But, at the end of the day, I think, at least for me, there was a time in my life where I always knew there was more. I always knew there was more. And by more, I don't mean more material possessions and things like that, but more adventure, more feeling alive whilst being alive, more passion, more purpose, all of these things. But yet I never knew what to do about it. Because if you haven't broken out of your typical environment, and your parents haven't broken out of their typical environment, and maybe your friends that you grew up with aren't focused on breaking out of the environment, and that's okay, right? Like, I want to leave with that too. That doesn't make your parents or your friends less than or whatever. It's just that you may be the one person in your friend group that, for whatever reason, is hell-bent on doing something different. And if you are that person listening to the show, which I imagine you are, that's who I made the show for, I know it can be confusing. I know it can be strange. But like Chris said, when you feel that pull, right? He was looking for the signs. He was centered enough in himself that when he drove by that sign, he saw it as a sign and he took it as a sign. And then he felt the call in his heart, signed up for the Peace Corps, went to the Peace Corps, had this incredible experience. And then coming home, knew that he was going to be a different person. And I'd love if you could share when you got home to when you really dove into creating Beats and Breath and everything that you do now, because I know you've been doing breath work for a long, long time. It's one of my favorite modalities as well. And, I really want to articulate for people how you continued following your heart. Like, once you had done it for the Peace Corps, and it's not like that's the first time you had ever done it, but again, like, I imagine it got a little bit simpler to feel that feeling. What was that feeling like? And what did you do getting home from the Peace Corps that led into everything you're doing today?
Yeah, I think for me, it's always been about following my highest excitement and joy, even if it feels scary. And that's like a huge point that I want to drive through, is like just becoming a yes person to life, like saying yes. And that doesn't mean like there isn't a no, because there is a lot of no's. But those no's are the ones that are not aligned with my heart and my highest desire and joy. And so when you are aligned with your excitement and your joy and your aliveness, and you continue just to show up and say yes, even when it feels scary, even when it feels like you're leaning into a big edge, that's really the secret formula. And you might not know where that's going to lead. And that's the best part about it, is that, like, the unknown, the uncertainty, like, it's not what would life be if we didn't have that? It would be boring. And so you don't really know what's around the corner. But at the same time, my mantra is, if it feels good, follow that. And what I mean by that is, if it feels good in your heart, then follow that, and live your life, because, like, we only have a short amount of time on this planet. And so for me, post Peace Corps, I actually came home. I was really, really depressed for like 6 months. Just coming back to the Western culture and the consumerist ways, and just kind of seeing everything as absolutely absurd the way we live. It really sent me down a deep rabbit hole. And I also just, like, I just wasn't the same person, and everybody else kind of stayed the same. So it was really hard to integrate back into society. But after I kind of got my feet under me and started to, really take an interest to, first it was herbalism. I went through an herbalism school, getting into energy medicine, getting into breath work, and starting to do these different trainings and certifications, coaching, and all of this then just started to spiral, right? Where I was just like looking at ways in which I could take all of these, not only certifications, but my own natural gifts of communicating, of sharing, of teaching, of all of these things, and being able to then tie them together and bring out a service that, people could benefit from, and really, I guess where my work lives is like this intersection of somatic healing, of wisdom teachings, of even neuroscience, and, using these different tools and practices to really help people shift their lives and elevate themselves from the inside out. And so, yeah, it's been over a decade now since I've been, in the practice of many of these different modalities, obviously breath being the foundation of them all. And, basically in 2020, 2021, I met Johnny, who's my business partner in Beats and Breath. We started Beats and Breath and started creating these, really cool, accessible breathwork tracks with hip hop beats, trap beats, and now, having an app, having a book, and, again, it's just following the excitement, seeing what the world needs, providing value, yet still aligning myself with my heart. And that's where it's basically led me to today, to doing this project with you and Breathe with Cannabis, and to have all of these different amazing experiences where it's like I get to show up and I get to fucking play and have fun and make money and create impact. Like that's like the best equation possible.
Oh, dude, I totally agree. There's no better feeling than getting up, Breathe with Cannabis, immediately calling you and being like, that was so fun, and like, that's what you want life to feel like, guys. And it can, all right? Don't fucking settle for any less. I find so many people, and I was definitely this person too, that after a while you're like, well, I guess this is just all there is. And that is bullshit. Like Peter Pan said, growing old may be mandatory, but growing up is optional. And so at the end of the day, and I would beg to argue that if you don't grow up, right, because it's a trap, then you don't really grow old. Because to me, growing old, right, like put it this way. I remember the first time I ever went to LA or California in general. And I was shocked at how young the older people acted, looked. I mean, it was crazy. Like, here are people that look like my grandfather, but they're wearing a tie-dye and they're ripping on a longboard and they're like got Bluetooth speaker going. And these are the same aged people as back in Boston. But in Boston, they look like relics. Out there, they look like a 1970 Chevelle that's a resto mod and it's perfect condition. It's got a modern engine in it and everything, but it looks like an old car. And so again, like that whole idea that if you don't grow up, which what is growing up? It's basically giving up on your dreams and getting very logical and rational. That's what I see, growing up as. If you just ditch that whole idea and you realize that you can be anything that you want, you can do anything that you want, so long as you put the heart before the mind, then life will take you to some really wild places. And, again, guys, for those listening, I know I've said this before when I've interviewed Chris, but Chris just reached out to me on Instagram. We started talking, and now we do Breathe with Cannabis. It's that simple, guys. Like when you're in alignment, the right people, the right places, and the right things for you as an individual fractal of the divine will just magnetize into your reality. Chris reached out. I was like, that sounds awesome. Let's hop on a call. And I was like, holy shit, this guy fucking really knows what he's doing with breathwork. This is sick. Yeah, I'd love to do that. And then we just started doing it. I actually found our flyer from our first one ever, dude, on Canva, I think recently. Yeah, dude. It was really funny, bro. It was so cool because it feels like yesterday, but at the same time, I mean, fuck, it's been almost 3 years now, we just been having fun. I mean, fuck, so many of the, especially the in-person experiences, they felt like just like music festivals of their own. Remember 2 Decembers ago where we did one at Aaron's house, one at Daniel Raphael's, and then one at Third Eye? Just so fun, dude. We're hanging out in an Aladdin-themed basement, Daniel Raphael's house. It's like an opium den down there. It was so rad, and it's just like so many cool people. And yeah, it's amazing, man. And, the ability of people to leave impacted is so powerful, dude. And that's why I love what we do so much. And, I'm curious for you, man, like, everyone's got their favorite modalities, right? Like for mine really are cannabis and breath work. I like them because I think they're just so simple and they're very efficient and effective. What makes you love breath work as much as you do and cannabis as well? And whatever other modalities we consider quote unquote your favorite, like what makes those your favorite? Why do you like them so much?
I just think the first word that comes to mind is accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
Accessibility, where a lot of times I mean, we talk about it's like going to the Amazon and sitting with a shaman, with a guide, and dropping into Aya, which is a beautiful medicine and one that I've journeyed with many times. But just the way in which one, the breath it's free, right? It's always with us. It's never not with us. If it's not, then we're not living,
Mm-hmm.
like quite literally. And so, when we can learn how to modulate and to work with our breath in a conscious, intentional way, then it really becomes a game changer in the way in which we live our lives, because we become more present, we become more in tune, we become more aware of the inner sort of voice that is calling out, which we might label as our intuition, our soul. And this is the really true guiding voice that's going to guide us towards our soul's destiny. And so, that alone, just that little sliver of working with the breath can really amplify our soul's knowing, and that deeper connection to our higher purpose. And then beyond that, the physical, mental, emotional healing that comes from that, the focus, the creativity, the inspiration, and so forth. And so again, it's extremely accessible. It's with us all the time. Yet, 99% of our reality is very much on autopilot. And so when we can switch off that autopilot mode and just take a few more percent back to breathing with intention, with consciousness, then we can begin to shift actually pretty profound, and reach pretty profound levels within ourselves. And then, of course, you stack really accessible plant medicine like cannabis on top of that, and it just becomes a home run hitter, and it becomes a game changer for how we can begin to rewire ourselves. And of course, there's so many other things on top of that in which we can begin to stack, like in working with even, medicinal mushrooms and different types of plants, non-psychoactive plants, and working, doing different practices like Qigong, and then getting deeper into working with our body and working somatically. So, things just stack, but just on a base level, working with the breath, it's such a foundational, simple thing, yet we don't hardly ever pay attention to it.
Yeah, totally true. I forget what they say, but it's like, they have we think 70,000 thoughts a day, 70% of which are negative. Well, I would imagine we do a couple thousand breaths a day, if not a lot more than that. And like 90% are shallow and trapped in the chest. And, again, when you have low and slow breathing, you have low and slow thoughts. And when you have low and slow thoughts, you have space. And when you have space, you have awareness. And when you have awareness, you know who you really are. And when you know who you really are, you never die because you're infinite. And when you realize that, the game is up, right? Like, and I really think that that's one of the reasons I love breathwork so much as well, and cannabis, because they're both very practical, especially in the modern day world. And, I love that you added in there what you're actually doing breath work for, because I think a lot of people in the modern day, they get into self-development work because they know they should be meditating or should be doing breath work or should be working out, but they forget why they're doing it. It's like for, a lot of people that go to the gym, it's like, okay, great, you're going to the gym. How often are you getting out there and swimming or going for a fun run with your friends or going on a mountain bike ride or going on a hike? Like, what are you actually doing with all that? Or are you just, I need to be in the gym every day, I need to work out? Like, I get it. I used to be an exerciseaholic as well, but now I'm not exercising just to be in shape. I'm exercising so I can go do more stuff in the vehicle that I have in this lifetime. And I'm not doing breath work every day because I'm a bad person if I don't do it, or I'm messing up my spiritual growth. I'm doing it because it helps me access my intuition. Same with meditation. And that's what we always talk about Breathe with Cannabis as well. And what I talk about cannabis in general is a lot of people are so focused on just growing the best weed or just figuring out how to have a healthy relationship with the plant. I'm like, cool, but why? Because if you don't know why you're doing it, then why are you even messing with it? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, the reason I like cannabis so much is because it shifts perception. And what is A Course in Miracles' definition of a miracle? A shift in perception. So for me, it allows me to access the miracle maker within myself to shift my perspective and my perception. And every time I do that, I get a little bit better at doing it even completely without. Because what I'm utilizing cannabis, breath work, meditation, all my favorite modalities for is to wake up within the dream. You know, like Jesus said, right? Like, you know, a lot of people glorify Jesus's body. They're like, oh my God, he was dead, and then he got resurrected. And oh my God, was he really crucified? Was he really this? Did he go to, and it's like, Jesus is like, guys, none of that matters. This dream is not real. Focus on what I was teaching you, which is you must practice real forgiveness to wake up in the dream. That's the reason why I was here. I wasn't here to prove that we can come back after we die, that I went to India for 20 years. Like, it's cool if you like just investigating, but if you think you need to understand all that to understand what he was talking about, it's just silly, right? And so I see that same type of thing. I've seen it first in myself, which is why I can spot it so well in others. But, you know, that idea of just like, I just need to be militant and disciplined versus I must be devoted, because devotion versus discipline is a very different thing. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because what you were explaining there is you in a devotional relationship to yourself and utilizing things like breath work to be able to access a deeper divinity within yourself and a deeper devotion, which is really amazing, man. Super cool.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I appreciate that reflection. And yeah, it's wild because it's actually 20,000 plus breaths per day, which is like significant. And how that, when think about just anybody thinking about that, do the math on that. 20,000 breaths per day, times that by 365. How many breaths do you take a year? And how many of those breaths are unconscious? And how many of our thoughts are so just looping in this way in which we are just completely spiraling and living in this place of dissatisfaction? And we get to change our own biochemistry, our physiology, and our psychology through as simple as breathing. Of course, again, you can stack and go deeper than that, but just on a very base level, it's like, man, this is the power that we hold within us. And so and really, I guess, when it comes to my mission and when it comes to your mission, I know we're aligned because we're working together. It's really just to wake people up to the medicine, to the power that they have within themselves. And when you can truly feel that and tap into that, that is where you begin to fully turn on the lights and begin to live a truly authentic and fulfilling life.
Yeah, dude, 100%. That's where you actually become alive. And, you know, for me, that journey is so fun of seeing how much more I can wake up within the dream, seeing how much more I can live whilst being alive. And I think one of the cool things too is that, you know, if you think about this, right, this is what I was thinking about when you were mentioning 20,000 breaths. Now, for anyone that maybe is like, okay, I'm sure you realize 20,000 is a high number. I don't think many people are going to be like, oh, that's nothing. We only breathe 20,000 every day. So let's picture this, right? If your breath is trapped in your chest and you have, say, a dysregulated nervous system or whatever it is as a result of that, right? Because the breath directly ties into your nervous system and all these things. And now you're breathing shallow 20,000 times a day. Maybe that's why you're feeling anxiety. Maybe that's why you're feeling shaky and any of these things. Because for anyone out there, and I don't recommend actually doing this, but I think just thinking about it would be good enough. Imagine if you took two shoes. One is a barefoot shoe. The other one has a high heel on it. And you put those on and you walk 20,000 steps a day. How do you think your back's going to feel after that, right? Now, what's the difference between that and what we're talking about? Now, again, different muscles might be sore, etc. But if you're going through that all day, every day for years on end, and then let's say you're going to the doctor to get anti-anxiety medication, do you see why this is kind of shooting yourself in the foot, ladies and gents? Because at the end of the day, you don't have a Ativan or lorazepam deficiency. You have a breath trapped in your chest issue. And until you figure that out, you know, not only are you not going to get rid of the anxiety, et cetera, but you're not going to be able to tap into this power that Chris is so eloquently talking about here. Because for anyone listening, and I imagine most of you guys have done this, if you've never had like a breathwork experience, and I'm talking completely sober, we're not talking about cannabis here or anything. if you've never had a blast off experience where you realize why people say breath work releases DMT, like I used to think that was like a funny thing. I'd feel a little tinge. Dude, there are times where I'm doing breathe with cannabis, and a lot of times I'm sober when I'm doing that because I just guide better in a sober state, especially when we're online. So I'll be doing that after I'm done leading my part. You're bringing people through the breath work, and I'll sit down and I'll go through it. And even on Sunday, I was sitting in my chair. I told you before, and I might not do the breath work today. Just sometimes it's hard to pull my consciousness back. Well, I decided to do it sitting here. Second round, I blasted off so hard, dude. When I came back, I literally had memories of other lifetimes. I remembered exactly, like I had the feeling of being a kid again. And I'm telling you guys, the experiences are so interesting and weird in a very good way. It's an obsession. I mean, I remember the first time breathwork became a psychedelic for me. It was December of 2020. I was technically doing LSD, and that's where I realized I could get there. And after that, I've always been able to get to a very similar spot. The medicines make it a little bit different. Maybe I stay there a little longer because cannabis produces the melatonin and acts as a precursor to DMT. But I mean, every time now, even in the sober state, I can get there. So if you guys haven't tried that, download the Beats and Breath app because it really is the best fucking app out there. I use it every day. You know, go on like a 20 to 30 minute journey. That's what I'd suggest if you really want to get your DMT moving and just see what feels fun to you, what journey, and really test that. Like Chris is saying, every time you can throughout the day, just ask yourself, if you're trying to make a decision, what feels fun to me? If you're trying to figure out what to eat or what to wear, test it in things that don't really mean much like that at first. And when you start doing that, you'll start being able to have a deeper connection of what feels fun to you. And that's really as simple as life can be. Just follow that. Like Chris said, even when it scares you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really key point because the body holds all the intelligence, all the wisdom, and everything really about this entire realm is about feeling and getting deeper into the feeling states because we're such a heady culture that really there's so many people that are just numb to their own feeling. Now, we can go into the trauma loops and the cycles and why that is, but we've already sort of alluded to that. I'm not going to get so deep into that, but really on a base level, what this is doing is helping us to feel deeper. And when we feel deeper, we tap into our body's intelligence, and our body's intelligence tells us, and it's a very powerful discernment tool where we can discern what is true for us in every single given moment. And whatever that truth is, following that feeling to the best of your ability. That you might feel something in your heart, a tingling. You might feel something in your belly. You know, your gut is extremely intelligent. And that is where the house of even the deeper levels of your intuition between the heart and the gut, and of course the higher mind, when we can begin to synchronize these different channels within us and feel deeper, we can access our higher intelligence, our inner wisdom, which is always there. It's never not been there. It's just been covered up by the ego mind that has us looping in the same patterns, the same thoughts, the same behaviors every single day. And so it's really getting out of the default mode network and rewiring the hard system, or the hard drive, and then beginning to rewrite all of that code so that we can live from a new embodied, empowered place.
Yeah, dude, totally agreed. And let's say that someone right now is like, fuck yeah, guys, I want to try this, right? Maybe they're just starting out. Maybe they're a little experienced, but they sometimes forget, right? Like we all do, of course, but maybe they're just starting. Maybe they're like you or I were 4, 5, 6 years ago, something like that. And they're like, okay, I really believe this idea they're talking about. I believe that I can access a higher intelligence within myself through things like breath work, or really following the fun. But maybe their fun is also breath work, let's say, or meditation or something similar to us. You know, for you, how do you discern the voice of the ego versus that higher intelligence voice? Or maybe it's not even a voice. Maybe it's a knowing. Like, I'd love if you could share what those manifest like for you. Now, again, for anyone listening, this could be different than how it manifests for you. But at least having, I'll share how I do it after too. And at least having a couple examples may help you figure out how to discern between those two voices. So how do you do that, Chris?
Yeah, it's a great question. I would say that number one, the ego mind, or let's just say the ego versus the soul, and how both of those voices manifest. The ego is always wanting to be in control. So we have to understand that first and foremost. The ego is always desiring control. And if that is always desiring control, then most of our lives, there's a sort of resistance in which we're living to the natural flow and the divine flow of life and where life wants to take us versus, we're in very much our own willpower, right? And forcing, chasing, striving. And the thought level on there is very much, how can I get more? How can I achieve more? What more can I do, right? These are the thoughts of the ego. And of course, we can even break that down even more, but just on a simple basis, that's what the ego is, sort of the mantra of the ego. The soul, on the other hand, is how can I allow more? How can I let in life? How can I be more in my heart and allow life to come to me and to flow with the rhythm of life? This is a harmonious dance and a balance where now I'm listening to the deeper inklings of my own soul and then following the call. And that call might be very subtle. At first, it might just be these little whispers, and it might not be as loud as what the ego is sort of screaming at us. And so it takes a level of, again, quietness, taking our time to settle into the body, settle into the heart, and allow ourselves to listen. And it doesn't always just come as just a subtle voice. It may come in signs and synchronicities and these different ways through people, right? And we need to be willing to listen to life because we miss signs all of the time. They're always around us. Yet, if we take time to slow down, then we can open ourselves up to receive those signs. I'll give you a great example. It just happened yesterday. So yesterday I get back from a hike and I drive into town. I'm in a second floor in a parking garage, and I come out of, I'm in a cafe. I come out, I come back to my car, and on my windshield is a frog. Okay. A beautiful big green frog sitting focused right at me on my driver's side, right on the windshield. And there's so many synchronicities around this. First of all, number one, how did the frog even get there? So
Yeah.
now that this frog is there, what does this mean for me? Because animals, right? Animal totems are very powerful. That's a whole nother conversation. The symbolism of the frog, right? This metamorphosis a frog goes through, similar to a butterfly. It's transformation, it's renewal, it's all of these things. Not to mention, I've been speaking about really diving deeper and working with the medicine of 5-MeO and starting to explore what that's like. So now, again, all of these things that I'm speaking into my reality, that I'm feeling within myself, I've been very much in this death and rebirth process as of late, in this void space. And the frog is just the symbol that's sitting in front of me that is telling me exactly not only what I'm going through, but again, the deeper layers of myself. And so the communication mechanisms that can come through people, it can come through animals. We have to be willing to listen. And when we can listen, then boom, we begin to receive. And that receivership is the feminine state. It's the allowance and allowing ourselves to integrate whatever it is we are receiving. We could easily say, oh, there's a frog on the windshield. Let's get it off and drive away. But I actually kept the frog on the windshield. I actually drove throughout town the entire day, got home and released it on my property. It wanted to stay there the entire time. So it's like, I just use this as an example. There's so many examples I could use. The Peace Corps sign on the highway. It was a literal sign in front of me. I chose to listen to it, right? And so these are how we work with tangible reality, with material reality, and the way things are manifesting.
Dude, so amazing, man, to really think about all this. And, one of the things that I'm really aware of as well is the reasons why we meditate, the reason why we do breath work. It's not just because we should be meditating twice a day, or, Taoism says we meditate twice a day, or this mystery school I'm a part of says if I'm not meditating, then I'm not doing what I need to do to wake up. Like, all this stuff is very confusing. It's like, are we just trying to become a human calculator, or are we trying to actually utilize these things for a greater purpose? And that is the purpose right there, because you get more attuned to the subtleties of life. Back, say, 300 years ago, there was still a lot going on, but there wasn't phones, there wasn't things like that. If you go back a couple, I don't know, maybe let's say 5,000 years to the average life, they were living in the same neighborhood, like they were hanging out with the same couple people. They didn't really have a lot going on. So they had a lot of time in quiet contemplation. And the reason is not just because you just should have quiet contemplation. It's because there's a lot of subtleties you don't notice when you're overstimulated. And those things are exactly like you said, like the way I'd explain it is the ego is a teenager, the soul is a grandparent. So if it sounds like I'm talking to a teenager, then I'm talking to the ego or I'm listening to the ego. If it feels like I'm listening to something that's a wise grandparent that I really have to listen to because their voice isn't that loud, but they are steeped with wisdom, that's the soul. But I can only hear that if I metaphorically tune the fucking rock music down of the ego and his like, shut up, mom and dad, it's not just a phase, whole thing. So I can hear the wisdom coming from the grandparent.
That's it, man. That's it. And I think in this culture and society, again, I think if we were to break it all down, we have two very, very core issues and problems. We have a disconnection problem. And again, when I say disconnection, I'm not just saying from others, I'm saying from self, right? And core self with a capital S. And we have a stimulation problem, which is creating this sort of chaotic, busy, noisy experience where we are just not really present for anything in our lives. And that in itself then feeds the disconnection, the loneliness, the isolation, the anxiety, the fear, the et cetera, right? So it can all really come down to these couple things. And so again, why we do the things we do, it's not just to, again, get high and breathe. It's literally to recalibrate your entire way of being in the world. And when you recalibrate your entire way of being in yourself and in the world, then your entire life gets to change and you get to become the foremost player in your life. You get to be number one. You get to actually take command and control of your life and live from the depth of your own soul. And living a soul-led life is much better than living a life on autopilot and a life that is disconnected.
100%. You know what I came up with last night? For people that maybe have not experienced what we're talking about here, and so they're trying to like they want to believe it, but they're like, yeah, but like, how much joy can it really add? What I ask them is, all right, have you ever had a dream before? Yeah. Have you ever had a lucid dream? Which one's more fun? Yeah, the lucid dream. Why? Because I know what I'm doing and I can run around and I can do stuff I'm not supposed to do or whatever. It's like, yeah, this dream works the same way. So that's exactly how I talk about it. And the pathway there is through in some way, whatever it is for someone, getting quiet enough to hear that voice. Chris has been amazing, dude. I can't wait to have you back on. I know you got a hard stop at the top of the hour, so I want to make sure I give you an ample opportunity to tell people where they can find out more about you, where they can buy the book you just wrote, Master Your Breath, Transform Your Life, where they can figure out where to find Breathe with Cannabis. Of course, I'll put that in the show notes, of course, but where can they go to connect with you and really bestow more of your wisdom, man?
Yeah. So first and foremost, my website, christopheraugust.co, which is really where you can find everything. I'm actually having a brand new site built right now, but I have my old site up still. Has all the different links on there, different experiences and so forth. And I also am about to open the doors to the Self Mastery Collective, which is going to be a space where you can come in and learn from me and what I'm sharing, how to access your intuition, how to amplify abundance, how to deepen your relationships, so forth, really covering all these areas of mastery. And, at the end of the day, if you want to dive deeper into this conversation specifically and how you can utilize your breath, again, you can download the Beats and Breath app, which is on Apple as well as Android. And through there, we have over 100 breathwork sessions. We've taken a little pause over the past few weeks, but usually every week we're dropping a new session. And really excited for all the beautiful things that are to come with Breathe with Cannabis. We have our collective now, the Breathe with Cannabis Collective, which is a great place to gather and to really share how these medicines of breath and cannabis can really transform your life and just really be around an awesome community and do monthly workshops and all the cool things. So really excited for what's to come, all the magic and miracles to unfold, and open to receiving them all and to be sharing this work and wisdom with everybody.
Hell yeah, bro. And one super quick last question. Let's say someone listens to this podcast and they want to start highly optimizing their life tomorrow. What's the one thing you would recommend they start doing by tomorrow?
Well, I think it's pretty simple in what we've already talked about. Really breathe. I invite someone right now, even listening to this, really deepen into taking just 20 deep inhalations and exhalations through the nose, out through the mouth, breathing into the belly, really allowing that life force, that prana, that life energy to flow through you, breathing in, breathing out. And do that repeated many times. And even just 10, 15, 20 times of that cycle of breath, you will feel more grounded. You will feel more present. You will feel more connected to yourself, to the world, to others. And it's been a great journey, my brother.
Woo! Guys, go give Chris a follow. Go check him out. He's absolutely amazing. We'll have all the links in the show notes. I love you guys. Have the best day ever. Go give the show a 5-star review if you haven't done it. We appreciate it so much. Helps us find more cool people like you. Till next time, everybody, may the source be with you to infinity and beyond. Peace for now.